Does the turtle sound all right to you?
Okay, tell the snail to slow down.
Okay.
Hey, Brad, don't forget to charge the Blue Fairy.
Tinkerbell, stand by. You have 10 seconds.
Who's in the centipede tonight?
Dave, let's make sure we feed the dragon channel 7.
How do I turn the lights on? Just like this. And what are they talking about? One of the most intriguing examples of the Disney magic, including what goes on backstage, especially what goes on backstage.
On with the show.
What has over 40 parts and 2 nightly starts? It sometimes rises 23 feet tall and features a dragon who breathes a fiery ball. But that's certainly not all. It has over 500,000 lights to brighten up those summer nights. And with 250 dedicated workers, it brings lots of cheer to millions and millions every year. You give up?
It's the Main Street Electrical Parade!
Disneyland Information, this is Angela. May I help you?
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the Main Street Electrical Parade.
Welcome to Disney Backstage, featuring a behind-the-scenes look at Disneyland's and Walt Disney World's Main Street Electrical Parade. Like so many of the aspects of the world of Disney, this parade is steeped in tradition, not just for the performers and the staff and the crew, but for the tens of thousands of people who line up along Main Street every summer evening just to get a perfect spot to view what has been called the shining star of the Disney jewels. So come on along with me backstage for a view that just won't quit. It's Disney magic up front and backstage. If you stand in one place, the parade is about 25 minutes long. Now that 25 minutes of entertainment has taken over 15 years to develop. Bob Yanni, the man responsible for the creation of the parade, takes us back. Bob, take me back to the electrical water pageant at Walt Disney World. How did that concept come about?
Well, I think it started because as we were building Walt Disney World, I kept looking out on primarily in Bay Lake, and at that point in time there were no horizon lights. Mm-hmm. The property, the Walt Disney World property, was so vast that we had no horizon lights or any city lights that you normally think of in a horizon, which meant we had perfect black or perfect darkness. And I just started fantasizing about what we could do with that black. And one evening, it was probably about 8 months before the park, we sort of created a thought about it, but we made a big mock-up of a whale, mm-hmm. all in lights that we set out on the water. And I took a number of the company executives at that point in time out on the boat. They didn't have any, on another boat, had no idea what they were really going to see. And a moment with, we said, okay, now watch. And we turned on the whale, and it caught everybody's fancy.
And then what were the steps that led from the electrical water pageant to the Main Street Electrical Parade at Disneyland?
After the electrical water pageant opened with the opening of Walt Disney World, at Disneyland, we really had a kind of a major problem in a couple areas. We had no nighttime business at that point in time. It really, as everyone knows it today, and also we had an enormous morale problem. The employees at Disneyland just felt like they were really working for a second cousin after Walt Disney World opened. So as we all returned to Disneyland to kind of, look at home after we had created a new one, it needed something new. And I think that probably more than anything else gave birth to looking for something else.
The building of the original parade took place in a warehouse in Chicago. Ron Miziker, then the director of show development, recalls.
Well, as Bob was going through telling me about his concept for the electrical parade, my thought was, how in the world are we ever going to make this happen? And he answered my question by saying that he knew of a company in Chicago that were really specialists in taking these little lights, and every Christmas they took Michigan Avenue, I believe it is, in Chicago, and covered it with lights in the trees and across the road and along the storefronts and so forth. And they really had this technology of how to deal with this many light bulbs. So he said that what we ought to do is go and meet with them and see what they think about how this could all come together.
As it was getting near to parade time, the deadline's drawing nearer and nearer, what were some of the problems you had with constructing it and getting the floats together?
Well, we found ourselves in a real disaster. The company in Chicago, as hard as they tried, really didn't have enough time and probably the technology to really make the units come together. And I was beginning to suspect this over the telephone, and with the phone calls, and they were saying, well, we're having a little problem with this and a little problem with that. So I finally decided it was time to go to Chicago and find out exactly where we were with the construction. So I flew back and I took a tour of the facility and where all the construction was, and I found things to be an absolute disaster. Here we were like 2 weeks away from opening, and so many of the units weren't even begun, and those that had were in just multiple pieces laying everywhere, and some had been wired and some hadn't been wired, and nothing had, and you look inside the one or two units that was completing, there were these masses of wires coming down, going nowhere. They're just hanging in the center, not labeled, and it was just absolutely a nightmare. And so I got on the phone with Bob and we talked about it, and we decided that the best plan of action was to organize another group, a second group of electricians and technicians in California, and we would try to ship the pieces out as quickly as they could get them into some sort of a form, and then finish the work in California, because we had the 3 or 4 day travel time in between there yet for everything to get from Chicago to Los Angeles.
It was right down to the wire getting the pieces built, and then they had to be taken apart because we never shipped anything like this at that point in time. And we got them here, and they were all in pieces, and no one here, in the parks knew what to do with them. And so literally we were right down to the wire getting it together to get it out the gate for that opening night.
Disneyland proudly presents our spectacular festival pageant of nighttime magic and imagination.
As the lights dim in the park, a computerized voice announces the beginning of the Electric Light Parade. The Blue Fairy leads the parade out of the gate each night. The spectacle she creates for an unsuspecting audience is just a taste of what's to come.
Parade, I play the Blue Fairy from Pinocchio. What I like best about Blue Fairy is to see all the lights go down and to see all the people's excitement on their face.
Okay, important announcements of the evening. If I can have your attention, please.
Vinnie Riley, in her position as parade stage manager, is responsible for, among other things, getting the parade organized and off on time each night. The job includes working with individual performers, coordinating and communicating the wishes of parade management, and keeping the parade on course as it winds its way through the park twice each night from mid-June through September each year. If Vinnie does her job well, chances are all will go well. But there once was a time when things were brand new that the Fairy in Blue almost missed her cue. Jack Muse has always been the parade's costume designer.
All I remember was we were fighting right up to the dress rehearsal, which was a Friday night, just to get the things completed. And we had a dress rehearsal, and obviously there were a lot of problems. It was the very first time. And so after a production meeting, we stayed up all night. I was wrapping, we had butterflies and flowers, girls, and they were not completed. And most of our staff went home, so I was wrapping bulbs around frames most of the night. And we were all here through the night and the next day, and the following night, which was Saturday, was a premiere.
And we were going to open Saturday night. And by Friday night, we had enough elements together that we thought we could really do a rehearsal. Well, it turned out to be absolutely disastrous, because as it went down the street, things broke. The big canopy over Cinderella fell apart, broke into pieces, and a horse fell over it and fell on the ground. One of the floats went out of control and bumped into a building on Main Street. And I mean, it was absolutely wild. So here we are the night before, trying to think about what are we going to do.
I'll never forget the night before a grand opening. It was Friday night when we had decided to do a dry run. It would give all the entertainers a chance to go down in their full dress rehearsal with the parade to be ready for the press opening on Saturday night. Well, for about a week we were working feverishly in the assembly tent area with probably 30 to 40 electricians trying to get this show on the road. And when it finally came time to moving the parade out, we looked around and started counting how many vehicles were ready to go. And I'd say probably about a third of the floats were really ready to move out in the parade route.
With all the problems that we had getting it together, we had only enough charge on the batteries to last around Town Square, where all the press were, and down Main Street. And we figured by that time they'd begin to fade, the lights would begin to fade away. But we didn't care, because those were the key people in that area. So I turned my back for a moment on the parade as it was lined up ready to go out the gate, and I turn around, and there's Bob Yanni walking down past the units, asking them to turn on the lights. He wants to see the parade. Turn on the lights. I want to see what it looks like before it goes out the gate. Turn on the lights. And of course, you know, I go crazy and run after him and say, you know, we don't have any charge of the batteries. Turn off the lights. Turn off the lights. Turn off the lights.
I had a lot of pressure on me because with the exception of the president of the company, who said, if you really believe in this thing, go for it. I don't think there was one other person in the entire company that was behind me in this mission. And I think my thoughts, it's hard to remember them, was probably that we had at least gotten the thing on the street once.
That's the Casey Jr. circus engine being driven by none other than our good friend Goofy. And the circus engine is pulling the world's biggest drum, being pounded on by none other than the Big Cheese himself. These lights are just some of the over 500,000 lights that make up this magical parade.
That circus train has been part of the electrical parade since it opened that anxious night in 1972. As the saying goes, a bad dress rehearsal, a great show. The parade was an instant hit, and the rest is history.
This is where the parade is stored and maintained. Over 200 production workers are involved in readying it and keeping it in shape. And even with the lights out, you can see that the floats are three-dimensional in shape. Well, you know, it wasn't always the case.
In the original design, the parade elements were two-dimensional, or flat in shape. With time, all things improve. In this case, due to the efforts of parade designer Ken Dresser.
Yes, they were two-dimensional, and the reason for this was for readability. We weren't really sure how many lights we could put on a float at that time, and most of the units were hand-pushed or pulled down the street. Therefore, we would align the lights so you could read them from both sides of the street.
When did you go to three-dimensional floats?
Well, as soon as we went down the street the first night, we felt we had a parade, and we started thinking about 3 dimensions. The Blue Fairy, who's been our grand marshal of the parade all along, actually was 3-dimensional in the parade. Right
From the beginning?
From the beginning. Then we had a dragon, which was a sort of a Chinese dragon, which had also a 3rd dimension. And this gave us confidence that we could go on building parades in 3 dimensions. When we finally retired the original parade and reopened in 1977, the entire parade was 3-dimensional.
So what were some of the design problems that were inherent in developing a parade that was electrical?
Fortunately, I was told not to worry about them. the wonderful thing with working for Disney is we have many experts that can figure these things out. Troy Barrett at the shop where we actually build the float units is wonderful at perceiving any of the problems and solving them. Brad Russo is an electrical wizard and can make just about any idea come true. Let me show you what part of this process is in the design. For instance, the bear, which is in the parade now as part of the circus unit, started off as just a basic concept drawing itself. And then I took the concept over to the Walt Disney Production Studios, and we actually went to the animation studios to give the bear a little bit more personality, and so we could really have it look a little bit more like a Disney type character. We came up with the idea of the hoops. They had it on a barrel. That wasn't really enough to balance it on the street because we do have to worry about moving the thing down the street and the batteries and all that. So then I came up with putting it in the little dots, which gives us the feeling of the lights, and this is what I presented. From here, we went to the drawings. And then I do a drawing of this nature, which shows all the color placement of all the light bulbs, each bulb. And then this shows our fabric samples, which we cover the bear with so that we don't see the lights through on the other side. Also, to help the ironwork, is we've made a model of all of this to give them the feeling of the top and the side.
Now, it's one thing to stage a parade. It's another thing to stage it at night, and yet another at night in total darkness. But this is where the electrical parade comes to life as no other can. When the concept of a parade made of lights was first imagined, the question of a power source was foremost on everyone's mind. An electrical engineer with creative resources was in need. After all, you can't plug in a moving show that's over a quarter of a mile long. Technical coordinator Jerry Hefferly developed the solution.
When we first looked at different power sources, we had to consider many different alternatives. I have to admit, for about a half a second, I thought about running long extension cords from Small World all the way down through Main Street, but that idea was rapidly put out of my mind. We did consider for a while as a power source the use of generators, which had somewhat been done on large parade floats before, where you had motor-driven vehicles. However, we were very concerned with noise and in these particular systems because audio was going to play such an important part of the parade. So as a result, we did come around to the concept of batteries, which really also allowed a great degree of freedom of movement for the parade vehicles.
Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse to the trailer, please. Mickey and Minnie to the trailer.
We're now backstage, and if you notice, you can see this is Main Street. Looks a lot smaller on this side, but this is actually Main Street. It's only about 1.5 stories.
We're coming to work right now to do the electrical parade.
The electrical light parade is at 8:50 p.m. and there's a repeat at 11 p.m.
Sometimes I find it hard to waltz and walk at the same time, especially walking over railroad tracks.
These green oval speakers up here are what we call the zone speakers, and they broadcast the musical soundtrack in the various areas of the park, and it's sort of like a subliminal musical effect that goes on. Wherever you happen to be, you're going to hear that basic song.
While sidewalk speakers play the overall theme music, the zone system allows each unit to broadcast its own special music as it passes by. Music that captures the magic presented over the years by those special Disney motion pictures. For example, the parade music for the Alice in Wonderland unit was inspired by this scene in the original animated motion picture. The song is called In the Golden Afternoon.
In the golden afternoon, there are dusty daffodils on the hillside. Strings of violets are all in tune. Tiger lilies love the dandelion.
Now here's the same song played on the electronic synthesizers for the Alice unit in the parade. Dorsey is the current musical director.
The Alice in Wonderland unit gave us a chance to do something a little different because there are bugs and creatures, and we tried to give each little item its own personality. And as you listen, if the snail comes by you on the street, you know, it'll be talking to you. The centipede has little footsteps going, and he's sort of singing on his way. The fireflies sing, fly to the bumblebee, and do things like that, and creates this whole sort of assembly of sounds and characters. So it has probably the most personality. And then, of course, Alice's themes sort of float over the top. The zone system, the audio control computer, is a system that allows us individual control of 22 zones that the parade passes through. The parade route is divided into these zones, which are about 75 to 80 feet in length. And as a unit enters a zone, we have the capability of identifying where that float is and fading up or down appropriate music, or signaling lights to turn on or off, something like that. It gives us the capability of following the parade down the street and triggering introductions in different areas. For example, the parade will come into the hub and there will be an introduction, a fanfare, an announcement. Then the lights will go out at a key point triggered by the computer. And then as the parade continues to pass around the hub and approaches Main Street, the computer says it's approaching Main Street and triggers another intro, and the Main Street audience then gets an appropriate fanfare and a light cue. And so in this way we're able to follow the system down the street.
It's larger than life here on the parade route. Alice in Wonderland, with Alice on top of one of 3 15-foot mushrooms. Well, the little bugs, they beep and they blurp, and the birds, they sing and they chirp. The music really enhances this parade.
Now, just how are those little bugs able to turn on a dime and spin about from time to time? No ordinary chassis will do that. The guts of these bugs is the type of thing you want to have at home on the weekend. Watch.
The ones that spin, those ones are in our Alice in Wonderland unit. They're the critters, as we call them. This is one of our drive units, and this is called a whirly bug.
And this is it without its little bug on top.
Yeah, okay. Bug. And it operates basically like an airplane. To go forward, you push forward, or backwards, you pull it back. And the wheels, as you see, the 4 wheels operate independently of each other. So it can spin and do all kinds of fun little crazy things.
Come on, Pat, let me see it. This is great. Forward, left. Oh, I'm glad you're doing it, not me. I'd get very sick. This is great. All right. How are the floats driven? What are the requirements involved in that?
Well, underneath each float, we have a drive unit, and each of those drive units varies a little bit depending on the size of the float that is on top of it and what exactly their requirements are, whether it spins or whether it goes straight down the route.
Drivers have the unique task of pacing their vehicles on the parade route. It's a tough job considering their limited line of sight and the loud music inside each vehicle.
Well, the cat's out of the bag. There's a driver inside of there, as there's a driver inside of each one of the parade floats. You want to take a peek inside?
Driving the Calliope is pretty easy. It makes wide turns. It's pretty much easy to see through, considering that you have a wide screen. And it's a lot of fun. You have King Lion up on top, and he's pounding on the cannons up there, and the CO2 is really active, and the crowd loves it.
It's obvious that costuming plays an absolutely vital part throughout the entire parade. Each is special in its own right, and each is partially comprised of light. Jack Muse has always been the parade's costume designer.
Designing costumes for an electrical parade is a very different approach from other costuming, because you have to, first of all, consider the number of lights, the weight of the batteries or the power source, whatever it is, and you have to consider how many performances the show will go, how many times a night, the time between shows. By that I mean whether you can launder or change costumes, charge batteries, do whatever you have to do to get the show back out there. And then you're also fitting a variety of people. You do not necessarily have the same performer every night doing the same thing. So your costumes have to be adaptable. to all of those circumstances.
Can you show us a few of the sketches from?
Well, these are some of the original sketches that I came up with for the Cinderella unit. Now, the finished products do not always resemble this because we do modifications. The director, the producer, other people have opinions, and I try to bring all that together and satisfy everybody in the final phase, and that's really what our costumes represent at the end.
Is this one of the Cinderella
These
headdresses?
are the wigs that they wear with the tiaras, and of course they have their sparkle like everything else in the electrical parade.
So the battery operating those lights is somewhere in the wig?
It's in the wig, yes.
Tell us a little about the process.
Well, the Cinderella unit from the electrical parade was the biggest costume arrangement we have in the show. And so I was very pleased to be doing that because we have about 30 people in costume, starting with Cinderella and the Prince Charming. And then the court dancers, which there are anywhere up to 16 dancers. There are also some livery in the scene. We laid the whole ballroom scene in the middle of the 19th century, as it was in the film Cinderella.
Could we look at some of your finished
Sure,
and
right
see
over
how
here.
it came out? Now, Jack, this looks pretty much like your design. How much is different from?
Well, there are some variations in the patterns and in the neckline, the placement of the lights.
Now, you say that there are different sections here. How does it come apart?
Well, we have to be prepared to fit a variety of people or performers and dancers. So it's actually three pieces. It's a bodice, the skirt, and then the underskirt. If we find that we have a taller girl, we have several lengths in this skirt.
Oh, I see.
So rather than have to alter this costume, we just use different pieces.
Jack, do the dancers have any control over their lights?
It's really very simple. They have switches like this right at their fingertips.
Oh, right over here.
That switch them on and off. And all the lights are mounted in this beading, which we had imported from France. Actually, the cost of just one of these costumes is $5,000 or $6,000.
Is that right?
Yes, with the wiring and the fabrics. This fabric was imported from France. We searched everywhere to find just the right things to put together because we knew we'd have the electrical parade for a very long time.
The shining star of the talented costume department is the Cinderella unit. Cinderella herself rides within the magical pumpkin coach, which is pulled along by mice dressed in what might be called light livery. The fairy godmother riding atop the coach can change the color of the coach with a simple wave of the wand. The ballroom scene takes place beneath the canopy of lights, carried by princely knights. Below, the dancers' costumes are covered with dozens of lights, even in their hair. The tower that warns of midnight is 23 feet high, the tallest item in the parade. In fact, taller than Elliot the Dragon, but don't tell him that. Finally, the prince holding the famous glass slipper while being distracted by two pretenders to the throne. One big problem encountered early on by the technical staff was how what are known as chase units in the lighting system would work. The system requires a steady flow of power, not one of the strong points of any battery-driven system. Jerry Hefferly.
Light chasers have been around for many years. What a light chaser is utilized for generally is to create some animation with lighting. You'll see just on very many signs, electric signs, as you drive down the road, you'll see arrows having motion or balls moving across the sign and things like that. Or perhaps even random twinkling effects. Those are effects that are created by light chasers. Well, the concept worked out very well, but what we found when it was finally put to the test was that the lights would get started chasing, but then they would just lock up. It might lock up with no lights on, or it might lock up with all of them on, or half and half. We just couldn't really tell what was going to happen.
When you stand here inside of Master Audio Control, you're kind of reminded of the Wizard of Oz, because it's from here that the Disney audio engineers can control every aspect of the musical portions of the parade.
In audio control itself, there are 3 video monitors and a computer control keyboard and a manual emergency board, which fortunately we don't have to use very often. The 3 monitors allow us to see simultaneously the position of the floats on the street along the parade route and the status of each of the amplifiers in the zones. We can identify which music is in which zone and at what level at any given point in time. And as the operator watches the floats progress down the street, she verifies that the proper sound is in the proper zone. And ordinarily, she'll sit there during a parade and not do anything. It happens completely automatically. But if, for some reason, something causes a glitch in the system or a float doesn't show up at a sensor on time, she can manually go in and cause a cue to be executed.
The sound system works by a group of ID transmitters. So we have audio control is transmitting the sound to each of the floats, and there's one float in each unit that picks up that sound, and there's a series of sensors in the street. So as they cross those sensors, the sound comes up in each zone or where you are standing on the street for that music, for that story. So if you are watching the Small World unit go by, Small World music comes up as they go by, and then it drops out of the sound zone that you're standing in as the Cinderella unit comes by, and then the Cinderella music comes up.
When we start designing a music loop, I take a sketch layout of the Baroque hoedown track and lay out the ideas of where I think melodies will go and begin to lay down a melody at a time into the synclavier, which is a digital synthesizer and sequencer, which will remember exactly what I play. If I play, for example, if I play it will remember that exactly and play it again. So I won't play something like that. I'll play something like and that will be the first piece of the bass line to the Peter Pan unit. Then I'll want to add a melody line. So I will then put that into the recorder. And the different pieces get added up until we have different sounds on every track. And then when we put it all together, you have the complete arrangement.
While the lights dazzle, the sophistication of the parade music and the heavy contribution it makes to the parade overall may not receive as heavy a notice. Still, Don Dorsey delights in the pleasure that it offers to the millions who experience the parade each year.
I think most of the audience does not realize the kind of audio tricks that we're doing because, as in any good show, when you do an effect right, it has a result and you don't think about how it was done. You know, if somebody flies across the stage, you don't think too much about a wire if it's a spectacular effect. And the audio is a very subtle but also very important event in the parade. And I don't think people realize that the sound is moving along. It's the kind of thing that you wouldn't notice until later on your way home. You'd think, gee, you know, the sound was all together and things changed, and, you know, how did they really do that? It's sort of an after-the-fact realization that something a little different was going on.
The amount of preparation that goes into this parade is mind-boggling. And what you see is certainly what you get, but there's a lot that you don't see until now.
The Peter Pan unit comes complete with a pirate at the helm of the famous pirate ship. Aboard are Peter and none other than Captain Hook. Following up, of course, is Mr. Smee, steering, well, sort of steering a rowboat. Troy Barrett is the person responsible for the construction of the parade. The units came together piece by piece, and there's always something being added to or deleted from the parade.
All of the units have a steel framework inside of them. That obviously requires metal people to cut the steel and weld it and that sort of thing. After the unit is all welded together, then we take it to the spray room and have it sprayed to rust-proof it and spray the color if it needs it. Then it comes back in the shop, and the seamstresses make a pattern of it for the cloth that's going to go inside behind the lights. Then it goes to the electrical people, and they tie all of the little lights on and then check them out and that sort of thing. Or during this process, the carpenters have to put wood on the base and that sort of thing. So most all of the building crafts are covered at one time or the other in building a complete float.
5, 6, 7, and 1.
Just as Troy Barrett has built the structure of the parade, Barnett Ritchie, senior parade director, has built the performing cast, selecting from hundreds who audition and then rehearsing with them until they perform perfectly as one.
This audition is actually a 2-day process, and we have about 700 people coming in both the days, men and women. After this audition process, once we have our cast together, and they've signed up and they've gone through all of the personnel and things that they have to do in order to sign up and be officially accepted as a cast member, then we start rehearsals, and we'll be rehearsing for 2 weekends here in the back area, and we teach them all their parts, and we put them in costumes, and we make sure everything is working fine, and then we take them out on the street, and then we have our night rehearsals on the street, and this is where it gets really exciting, because then the floats are all working, and we've got the music broadcast into all the zones, and we put the kids in their costumes, and we actually do several dress rehearsals out there, and that's how we can get our spacing correct and make sure that everything's really working well. And then we open, and we're on.
The parade is but one of the many responsibilities at the Walt Disney Company for Dennis Despy, Vice President of Entertainment. And like so many who are affiliated with the parade, it's a labor of love.
It is a show that is seen by more guests than any other show we have in the parks, and that even includes attractions.
What one aspect of the parade do you think makes it the most popular parade in the world?
Well, and the fact that it's unique in every way, shape, and form. The lights done in a design that create a scene is obviously unique. The music is unique. The costumes are unique. And the staging of the parade is done as a show, which is also unique. When you combine all of this, it's probably why nobody else has ever even attempted something like an electrical parade.
Dennis, let's talk about numbers for a second, statistics. There's 40 units, 40 floats in the parade, some as high as 23 feet, some as long as 112 feet. With all of this going on, do you ever worry that you're not going to be able to get it out there one night?
It really doesn't worry me. We have a terrific staff. It's like putting on any show, whether it be a stage show, a special event show, whatever. And a production group works on putting that event out every day. There's a staff of about 25 people who work on this show all year long, and a cast of about 135 who are rehearsed and ready to perform during the summer season when it runs at Disneyland, for instance. At Disney World, we have the same staff and a crew at the Electrical Parade production as well. And then obviously at Tokyo for the Electrical Parade, the same cast and size is needed there. So when you look at it for all three parks, we're really looking at 500 or 600 people being involved in putting on this production.
Probably the most important element of running the entire parade is the coordination of everybody working in unison with each other. The electricians, making sure every light is lit, the wardrobe personnel, making sure all the costumes are perfect, and all of that working in unison to send the parade out as a smooth, perfectly wrapped show.
Getting the parade ready to go each night is a marvel of coordinating logistics, the kind Disney is famous for. For instance, where do you park a dragon named Elliot while waiting for Pete? And everybody knows what can happen when hundreds meet. People, makeup, costumes, electrical parts. The preparations start about 2 hours before parade time. both in the park and behind the scenes.
Is everything moving down at Alice? Everything's stopping up down here. I'm not sure why.
Not all the preparation for the parade goes on backstage. Quietly, things are happening throughout the park as parade time approaches. There's preparation of the route from Small World to Town Square. Bob Galt, Division Manager of Operations for Disneyland, explains.
We initially set the parade up, stage it backstage in the order that it's supposed to come out. An hour and a half before the parade, our people will go through, set up all of our ropes and stanchions to identify the walkways from the viewing areas and make sure that we can move the guests in an organized fashion.
What happens if a float breaks down along the route?
Well, hopefully we don't have that happen.
Yeah, I hope not.
But sometimes it does happen, and wherever the point is, we have small tractors that we brought in along the parade route to the specific breakdown. We'll hook the float up and proceed along the parade route.
It's a tribute to the teamwork between show directors, seasoned stage managers, operations managers, maintenance staff, and disciplined cast and crew that the show runs smoothly night after night after night. That smoothness is in evidence tonight as my favorite dragon comes into view. A parade this large and complicated requires an equally large support system. Maintenance is constant and ranges from the small and mundane task of daily checking and replacing the tiny bulbs to a complete overhaul of one of the units. Brad Russo supervises the efforts.
We have approximately 16 people that work in the parade maintenance building, and our daily operation requires that we go through each individual float and check it for anything from broken casters to lights that are out, major structural problems, and just overall maintain the show quality.
At last the time has come. Each unit is lined up, drivers are in place, performers poised and ready. It's showtime. Still, the potential for problems with a living, breathing, performing entity is constant.
Stopped at Matterhorn. The lights haven't gone down yet.
Did you copy that, Julie?
Yeah. Okay.
As the parade readies to move out, and then as it moves through the park, there's a continuous dialogue that those viewing the parade do not hear as parade monitors or spotters communicate with master control.
Alice's microphone doesn't appear to be working.
Moving up or lining up the parade is something we go through each and every night for each and every parade. And what we actually do is set the parade or line it up right behind the exit that we are going to go out into the park with. And that entails moving up each float, checking that sound in each float to make sure that that sound works, checking the microphones, getting people dressed and plugging them all in, hooking up all their wires and their batteries, and then lining them up with their units so that they're all set, ready to go when we turn out the lights and send the parade.
That diamond mine unit takes 8 people to operate, with 6 performers and 2 drivers. In this case, both drivers double as performers. And guess who's bringing up the rear? You no doubt recognize this unit as Pleasure Island. It's led by the Funhouse Face and is followed by Pinocchio with the Cigar Store Indians and Lampwick with mask intact. Yep, it's a small world after all. A recreation of one of the most popular attractions at the Disney parks, with a towering tower, a merry-go-round, and a tiki unit, complete with that familiar music. It's a popular attraction in the parade as well.
La parade était fantastique, merveilleuse, très beau Disneyland.
No matter what language spoken, the reaction seems to be the same. People young and old enjoy seeing the parade, taking for granted everything that goes on backstage. Of course, that's exactly how everyone affiliated with the parade wants it.
The children enjoyed it. The lights were beautiful. They had all the characters beforehand do a pre-show for the audience, which was great.
What are some of the more common reactions of people watching the parade?
Ooh, that's really what we hear a lot. I think the parade is so unique in itself that people mostly are just staring at it and going, wow. And one of the nicest things is to walk down behind the parade and have people stand up off the curb and start clapping for you, because you don't think of it as a show, but in fact it is a show. And when you have people stand up and clap for the whole parade, that really gives you a good feeling inside.
The very first night that I saw the parade, I think the thing I remember most was this elderly woman that was standing next to me, and she showed me her arms afterwards, and she says, look at these old arms. She said, I haven't had goosebumps for years, and she said, tonight I had goosebumps.
When the parade initially starts down the street and the lights go out at Disneyland and the music comes up, there's always a tremendous awe in the audience. They're not expecting it. It's no matter how many times you've seen the parade, and we have a lot of returning guests, when that moment hits every night, there's a tremendous electricity in the audience as well.
The finale unit is a lengthy tribute to America, whose giant eagle overlooks all that has come before it. It's followed by rope tenders, who lead yet another parade. Its stars are those who have come to witness the spectacle of the Main Street Electrical Parade.
Well, there you have it, a backstage look at the Main Street Electrical Parade. You know, it's estimated that since the beginning, over 100 million people have seen this parade, either at Disneyland, Walt Disney World, or Tokyo Disneyland. And the demand to see it again continues to grow. It's like the song says, it's a small world after all, except maybe here at the Magic Kingdom, where it's an endless world of magic and intrigue. I'm Michael Young, and this is Backstage Disney.